have been getting slammed quite recently, even with the major dump and then the bounce or retrace. We have yet to see markets really rally, even on very positive news from David Sachs and the Trump administration, and even over at the SEC. But I believe it's because there's just a lot of uncertainty with how all of these policy changes are going to affect the market, while major market makers are accumulating crypto at these current levels and prices. If anything, if I was a retailer, or better yet, new to crypto, considering I am, right now is probably a better time to be picking up cryptos than back in November and December. However, Elon Musk, who's been running Doge quite heavily with like 19 to 24-year-old brainiac engineers and AI, some of his best engineers that he brought on from other teams that are currently sleeping in the office and consistently uncovering levels of fraud we didn't even think were possible. Well, in a recent post, he stated fraud in the federal government is closer to 10% of disbursements. So more like $700 billion a year we're spending on fraud and outright waste, which when it comes down to it, even if you tack on another 5% of waste, so it's not fraud, is still another $1 trillion plus, which is absolutely insane considering our interest payments on the debt are over $1 trillion per year. Now, truly what should piss any American off, and anyone who does not look at this type of spending is absolutely out of line. Because if it was your money, you would care. And ultimately, it really is if you're an American taxpayer. But some of the most insane USAID spending that was recently found is they sent $2 million for Moroccan pottery, $2 million promoting tourism to Lebanon, $20 million for a Sesame Street show in Iraq, $32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru, $2 million for sex changes in Guatemala, and numbers have consistently been changing, but from Trump, we heard it was almost 100 million. Some people say 50 million. Right here, we're looking at 15 million for contraceptives and condoms in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. What's even crazier is this does not include all of the money and disbursements to undisclosed recipients and all sorts of miscellaneous items that are truly looking more and more like fraud. We had $45 million in DEI scholarships to Burma, $520 million for consultant-driven ESG investments in Africa, and $1.2 billion to undisclosed recipients. So think about that. Many people will say, well, 40 to 50 billion isn't that big of a deal for the United States, but 40 to 50 billion dollars is a lot of money. And if you can consistently cut this waste and fraud, we'll get to $1 trillion to $2 trillion. We'll lower the deficit and America will finally have room to breathe without going into debt and into an early grave. But with Elon and Doge uncovering all of this fraud, you have people like Chuck Schumer basically saying that Elon is operating a shadow government and conducting a hostile takeover. But in reality, they're worried about getting kicked to the curb and no longer getting their kickbacks. And all we're doing is auditing where all of this money is going. So if you're an American taxpayer, this should be something that gets you excited because we are on the right track in the US. So much so that now regulation is going to be clear and no longer will we have the SEC breathing down the necks of all these crypto companies, as the SEC is reducing its crypto enforcement efforts, reassigning over 50 lawyers working on cryptocurrency cases. And then we just witnessed David Sachs speak to the press about their plans for crypto.
So one of the things that the president instructed us to do was to evaluate the idea for a Bitcoin reserve. And so that is one of the things, that's one of the first things we're going to look at as part of the internal working group in the administration. So as soon as we get all that set up, we're still waiting for some cabinet secretaries who are on the working group to get confirmed. So we're still in the very early stages of this. But that's one of the first things we're gonna look at is the feasibility of a Bitcoin reserve. I think the concept of the sovereign wealth fund is a little separate, and you'd have to talk to Secretary Lutnick, or soon to be Secretary Lutnick, about that.
And that's not all. We now have crypto mom Hester Peirce announcing that she will be leading the SEC's crypto task force. Peirce is focused on creating a clear regulatory framework for crypto assets, and they want to get this taken care of within 6 months and latest potentially by November. So this is all very bullish news. So then why are markets failing to rally or truly recover? As we saw XRP dump to lows of like $1.70 and is currently sitting at about $2.50. Well, I believe it's because many people are worried about a few different factors in the TradFi markets. In one case, we have the Kobisi letter sharing that in 2025, $9.2 trillion of US debt will either mature or need to be refinanced. And a lot of this refinancing is going to happen at higher levels of interest because we've failed to bring inflation down at the Fed level. It's remained far too sticky, and so the Fed is keeping interest rates higher for longer, which explains why gold is surging and now hit a recent high of $2,850. People are worried about what's going to happen with the dollar and with the US economy. In other words, this isn't looking really good right now, as the average interest rate on $36.2 trillion of treasury debt is 3.2%, and it's the highest since 2010. And then you have something like the US reverse repo being drained. Now stick with me here. As you can see, back in 2021, when the market was doing really well, and then we started to get some major downside in the markets through 2022 when crypto markets collapsed, the stock market collapsed, things went really high, up to $2.2 to $2.4 trillion. Well, now the repo is being drained right back to these levels. And the reason this is so important, and what we asked Grok to explain, is the fact that this facility, or the reverse repo, allows money market participants to park excess cash overnight, earning interest, and its draining indicates a tightening of monetary policy. In other words, people are parking more cash, which is draining the repo. Now, this can lead to higher interest rates, and it's likely that the Fed intends to combat inflation by reducing liquidity. But generally speaking, we're talking about tighter monetary policy in markets, and markets do not like that. And I'm not going to lie, this is one of the most difficult markets that we've ever had to trade in crypto, as we've seen a major decoupling between altcoins consistently underperforming, while the top 10 by market cap and Bitcoin are totally outperforming the rest of the market, as even you have people all over X and Twitter basically stating that there is foul play and that the market's behavior is baffling. It's evident that the market is being held down intentionally by the elites to ensure that only top 1% benefits. The elites are exhausting market participants, making them believe that the market is peaked and it's all over. But eventually, when everyone has given up, the market will skyrocket. So the term HODL has never been more relevant, and you should not let them shake you out. And I'm in the same ballpark. My personal theory is that the bull market is not yet over. This was a nasty shakeout, and its potential, we might see a slight more downside. However, I'm still bullish through May of this year. And if for whatever reason this bull market is truly done, then it was one of the most short-lived Bitcoin and crypto bull markets of all time. But this remains to be seen, considering we're getting a lot of really positive news in the crypto space. And if anything, this is a great time to accumulate into new local range lows before we start to print some all-time highs.